What's up everybody, I'm Tim from Tim Rich Gifts. So this video is going to be all about fragrance blending. That is, blending your own fragrance oils to come up with your own unique signature scents. This is by far the most requested video I've ever had, so let's get right to it. So the thing about blending your own fragrance oils is it's actually pretty easy. It's really not complicated at all, but there are some people out there that will overcomplicate it, overthink it, and make it seem a lot harder than it actually is. What really trips people up is when they start looking at the online resources and they start trying to measure top notes and bottom notes and middle notes and start trying to build a complete fragrance based on using single notes, which is what the resources are going to tell you. Let's talk about those resources real quick. I'm going to show them to you just because there might be something that you can gain from using them. But as I'll explain in a minute, they're better off left alone because they don't really help us whenever we're dealing with fragrance oils. You'll see what I mean. First thing we're going to talk about is the fragrance wheel. I'll leave a link in the description. I'll leave a picture of it up for a second just in case you guys want to screenshot it. So here it is. Okay, so that fragrance wheel is used by perfumers to classify the scents into different families. And there's certain patterns that they can use whenever they're trying to blend scents. Like families directly across from each other will blend, families directly next to each other won't. Different types of patterns they can use. Doesn't really help us. The reason that fragrance wheel doesn't help us is because of the complexity of the fragrance oils that we're going to be using. Now it's easy to classify some of the scents to fit on the fragrance wheel, like cinnamon and oak moss and gardenia. You can see exactly where those fit. The problem with putting the fragrance oils on there is that fragrance oils are so unique, it becomes a little too subjective. Now it's easy to tell where oak moss goes on the fragrance wheel, but where would you put dragon's blood? Where would you put toasted marshmallow? It just becomes a guessing game, and once you start guessing to use a scientific tool, really no point in using it to begin with. The next tool that you'll see is the Demeter Fragrance Blending Pyramid. I'll leave another link for it. Here's a picture of it if you guys want to screenshot it. The way that works is it breaks the different fragrances into different types of notes. As a general rule, when you're building a fragrance, you want good top, middle, and bottom notes. The pyramid breaks it down so you can actually draw from the different scents classified as different note types and be able to build your fragrance. Now again, works great with single note fragrances, but doesn't help us a whole lot with fragrance oils because they're already so complex to begin with. So basically using those two resources is great if you're using single notes. So you've got this, and it's easy to put those together using those resources. The problem with fragrance oils is we've got this and this, trying to put them together. It's hard to follow the pattern when you've got so much going on. Another way to look at it is we don't need to use those because somebody a whole lot smarter than us has already done so, and now we just get to take their hard work and have fun with it. So let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to show you the tools we're going to need, and we're going to start blending our own fragrance oils. So let's go over the supplies we're going to need. First thing we're going to need is a good digital scale, our fragrance oils of course, plastic bottle with a lid that we can blend in, some Q-tips, some blotter strips, some plastic pipettes, and a mason jar with a lid. That's really all we need, so let's go ahead and get started blending our own fragrances. Okay, so when we are blending our own, not a whole lot of science goes into it. For the most part, it's basically just going to be guesswork and enjoying ourselves. But we can apply a bit of a process to it to ensure consistent results. So we're going to break it down into two phases. The first phase is going to be the first impression phase. It's basically where we decide what fragrance oils we're going to use and try to determine if they're going to work well together or not. Now there's nothing wrong with taking just a few extras that you have, trying to blend them together to see what you come up with. But if you're going into it looking for a serious fragrance, it's a good idea to have a general rule of what you want to accomplish as your end result. So for me, I'm looking for a nice, clean, fresh, manly scent. So to try to blend and get there, I'm going to start with Merlin's Forest, which kind of has like a aftershave shaving cream smell to it. I'm going to be using Clean Cotton from Aztec, and I'm going to be using Black Ginger and Bamboo from Flaming Candle, which kind of has a really clean, smooth soap scent to it. Now I've picked 3. You can do this with 2, 3, 4, 7, 10, whatever you want to blend to try to get the fragrance that you want. So first things first, this is the first impression phase. We're not going to get too ultra scientific and measure everything at this point. Basically what we're going to do is just a real quick test just to see how these blend together, just to make sure that they do actually match together and don't just smell completely nasty. So to do that, we're going to take our mason jar and our Q-tips, and we're just going to dip one end of the Q-tip into each of the fragrance oils. We're not going to wring it dry. We're not going to try to measure that. We're basically just going to get some on there. We're going to put that in our mason jar. And we're going to do the same thing with any other fragrance oils that we're going to want to try in there. Okay, so we've got them all three in there. We're just going to close it up. Just give it a bit of a shake. Now we're just going to let that sit for about 10 minutes, get that time to mix together. Basically, we're just seeing how well these match together. This will give us a general idea if this combination is going to actually work. It may smell good. It may, for some reason, trigger some sort of reaction that gives off a skunk smell. So it's best to get this first reaction test out of the way without putting a whole lot of work into it, so that way if you do have to restart, you're not out a whole lot of supplies or time and effort. Okay, so we waited about 10 minutes. Now we're going to open this up and just see what our first impression is. You're going to see how well these three fragrances mix together and see if it gets us close to actually what we want to accomplish. Okay, so we've got our first impression of them. Now is where we want to start taking notes. This is the first impression phase, so we're going to start recording our first impression. My first impression of this would be that the clean cotton is a little overpowering. You can't quite smell the black ginger and bamboo. You can definitely smell the Merlin's forest. So right now it's basically clean forest, or clean cotton, and Merlin's forest, just slight notes of that. They all smell great together, but one or two is definitely overpowering the other. So we're going to take note of that. Then when we get to our mixing and measuring phase, we're going to fall back on that. So when we start doing our measurements, I'm probably going to need more black ginger and bamboo to even this scent out. So we've got our first impression out of the way. Now we're ready to start mixing. The reason I use the 8-ounce jar, you can really use any size jar. I just prefer those mainly because everything fits in there. I feel like there's enough air volume in there for everything to mix around together. And it's big enough to where I can get my hand in there and clean it up if I need to start over and retry. Right, so our first impression's done. We're happy with what we think the results could be. So now we're ready to start mixing and measuring. To do that, we've got our fragrance oils again. We're going to have a small digital scale, an empty plastic bottle, and our pipettes. So we got 3 different fragrances, so we want to have one for each fragrance. So we can go ahead and turn our scale on. Now we're ready to start mixing and measuring. Now there's actually no prescribed measurement that you need to use. Instead, we're going to use a measurement called parts. Parts can be basically any measurement that you make up. It can be anything that you want to use, just as long as you consistently use that part as a measurement. Now some people will say that you can use as little as 1 drop as a part. I guess technically that's true. I don't like using that little of an amount just because I don't think it mixes well enough. And if I go to scale this to a larger amount, it's hard to figure out how to scale that small of a part. So if I'm using 1/10 of an ounce and I want to make a full pound of this, I can easily figure out how many tenths of an ounce are in a pound. It becomes a lot harder if I'm trying to figure out how many drops are in a pound. So I like to use a measurable amount that I can scale later on if I need to. So for my measurements, I'm going to be using 1/10 of an ounce. We're going to go ahead and set our bottle on the scale, tear it off, and now we're just going to start measuring. We're going to start with our clean cotton. All right, we've got our 1/10 of an ounce. Now we're going to add our Merlin's forest. And last but not least, we're going to add our black ginger and bamboo. Now we have 1 part of each, so we're going to go ahead and cap it off. Mix it around really well. Now we're just going to let this sit for a few minutes, give that a second to mix, and we're going to come back and check it. Alright, so we've come back to check it. Now basically we've got the exact amount of measurements that we did for our first impression test, so I'm expecting the results to be somewhat similar. And it's pretty similar to the first impression test. You can definitely smell the clean cotton and the Merlin's forest. The black ginger and bamboo was really subtle, so we're going to go ahead and add another part of that. We're going to go ahead and tear off our scale again. We're going to add another 1/10 of an ounce of the black ginger and bamboo. Mix it up again. Let it sit for a few minutes, come back, check it out. Now at this point it's getting closer to where we want it, but it's lost a lot of that manly bite that I was looking for. It's basically just a nice clean smell. So I want to add a bit more manly punch to it, so we're going to add some more of the Merlin's forest. But I don't want to add a full part, because that's just going to basically overpower what I've already accomplished so far. So because I've used a measurable amount, the 1/10 of an ounce, I can actually use half of a part now. I can break that down from 1/10 of an ounce to 50/100ths of an ounce. So instead of 0.1, I'm now going to do 0.05, or half a part. So we're going to add half a part of the Merlin's forest. Again, let it sit for just a second, make sure it's going to mix well. Now we're going to check it out again. Okay, so at this point, I'm actually happy with where it's at. I've got everything measured out in my notes, everything detailed so that if I were to want to scale this up to a 1-pound bottle, I could just scale up my notes, do a little bit of math, and there I'd have it. Now, if you weren't happy, you could keep adding more parts, or if you felt like it was missing something. Say this smelled just right, but it needed to be just a slightly bit woodier, we could actually add some sandalwood. So to do that, we would just go back to our first impression test. We could just take our sandalwood, do a first impression, just dip sample of that, and we just do a dip of this. So then we would have our mixture that we've made so far. We can start adding other elements to it, just doing our first impression test so we don't waste a lot of this, and being able to add other elements to it to see if we can improve it some more. But I'm actually happy with the way this has turned out, so we're going to do one last test on it. And that is our blotter test. Now, if you're at all familiar with fragrance oils, you know it can be a lot stronger out of the bottle. So we're just going to take a blotter strip, I'm just going to dip the end of it in there, and we're just going to let this air dry a bit. This will give us just a bit better idea of how this fragrance is actually going to perform in the air, rather than just a whole strong bottle full of it. Now you can buy these from different supply companies. The great thing about these is you can get them just about anywhere. Pretty much any beauty store is going to have them. The great thing about being a really serious looking guy that wears camo all the time is when you go to Sephora, they're not going to pay any attention to you. So I can walk around and steal as many of these as I want to. Just kidding. If you ask the nice ladies, they'll give you as many as you want. But these are easy to pick up. These work great. Just let this air dry, and this will give you a bit better idea of how this is going to smell outside of the bottle. And it smells great. It's exactly what I was looking for. So at this point, I'm ready to lock down my notes, scale this up to a larger bottle, turn it into a candle. A couple side notes. One of the reasons that I use a clear plastic bottle is, one, because it's clear, I can see how it's mixing. You will occasionally have fragrance oils that may not mix very well. You'll actually be able to see them separating. But as you can see, these are all mixing really well. I can see that because of the clear bottle. I also like to use just these small bottles just because they're easy to store. Once I scale this up, I'm actually going to do this in a completely separate bottle. I'm actually going to save this. This is actually going to be my, I guess my master fragrance, if you will. I'm going to put this up, label it, so that way if I ever need to refer back to it, it's just to kind of refresh my first impression, to make sure that my scaled version smells exactly like I wanted it to. I can just pull this sample bottle out of storage and just compare it to the scaled up version that I've made to make sure that it matches on the larger scale. Alright guys, and that was scent blending 101. As you can see, it's not really that complicated. It's basically just a lot of guesswork, a lot of having fun, and a lot of creativity, along with just a slightly structured and detailed process. As long as we're taking thorough notes, using a lot of consistency, the rest is up to us. We can let our creativity take over. Alright, so before I close this out, let me answer a few questions that I know I'm going to get. First is my scale. Anytime I have a scale in my videos, everybody asks me where I get it. This is a Taylor Model 1250, just small pocket scale. I actually got this one at Target. Any small scale will work. I prefer this one just because it goes to 1/1000th of an ounce. So it's got a great range on it. It's nice, small enough that I can move around. And it was fairly inexpensive. I think I gave maybe $10 or $12 for it. So that was my scale. Next question I'm going to get is, can you blend fragrance oils from different companies? Absolutely. I used 2 different companies in my example today. Occasionally you may find just one weird odd one that's not going to mix. But as a general rule, these companies all get their solvents and their aroma oils and their essential oils from the same place anyway. They all pretty much get them from BASF. So they'll mix because they're from the same place, basically. And lastly, yes, you do still have to do a test burn of your candles with this to make sure that it's actually going to perform in your candle. Now, all of these are designed to perform in the wax that you're going to be using. So by mixing them, there's really no reason for us to believe that they won't continue to mix. Basically, this should work in a candle because everything that we put into it has been designed to work in a candle. So we don't really have any reason to believe that it won't, but you still need to test it just to make sure. You never know, you're dealing with chemicals and solvents and oils, so something weird might have happened. So you need to test it just to make sure. And last but not least, yes, there's tons of recipes out there that you can use. A lot of the supply companies will provide you with recipes kind of in their learning section. I've found some really great ones. I'm going to add as many as I can in the video description. So you guys make sure you check those out. So you guys get busy mixing, see what you can come up with. If you do come up with something awesome and you want to share it, feel free to list your recipe in the comments. And I know if you do find something, you probably don't want to share it, but at least share with us what you've named it. Now that all the hard work of actually making something's over with, The fun part is getting to name it. So share a little bit of your creativity with us. Leave us a comment. Let us know how you're doing. You guys make sure you subscribe to my channel. Turn on the notification for more great videos. Thanks for watching, everybody.